Welcome to an introduction to educational research video, things to consider when reading a research article. This video is intended to highlight some of the areas you may want to consider when you're reading a research article. Reading research articles is an extremely important skill that can be a bit arduous when you first start out. However, it is a skill and therefore it can be mastered or learned. If you are not already proficient in reading research articles, with a little hard work and some time, you'll become much more fluent and proficient. If you put in some good, hard scholarship and work up front, it'll pay dividends throughout your master's program and your entire teaching career, actually. Now, an email should have been sent to you with a piece of research titled Prompting Bar Patrons with Signs to Take Free Condoms. You will need to have a hard copy, a printout of that article in front of you before you watch this video. If you do not have the article in front of you, but you've printed it out, I suggest you put the video on pause and go and get the article and then come back and turn the video back on. If you have not printed out the article, then I suggest you stop watching the video, go print out the article, and then once you have the article and you're ready, bring up the video again and watch it along with the article. If you did not receive the article, then please email me right away and I'll email it back to you as quickly as I can. So what I'd like to do is to go through some guidelines you should consider when you're reading a research article and have you follow along and read the actual research article that you have in front of you as we go along, comparing it to the guidelines. I'm going to ask you to take some notes as we go along. So make sure you have something to take notes with and to take notes on. At the end of this video, I'm going to ask you to write an evaluation of this research article that you have in front of you using the criteria presented in this video guide. So why don't we sort of get started? Again, you'll need a copy of the research article. So let's start out. It's a good idea when you're starting out to read a research article to skim it first, to look it over, to get a general idea and become familiar with the different sections and the different parts. So to begin with, I want you to take a look at the very top of page 1 of the article you have in front of you. It has the name of the journal the article is published in, which was the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, which, by the way, is a very prestigious journal in the social sciences. And it has sort of the citation information. It published in the summer of 1990, and it appears in volume 23 on pages 215 to 217. And you can see the red box number 1, that's where that information is. Now, that information may seem trite at the time, at the moment, but you'll see later it has some important significance. Now next, take a look at the very bottom left of page 1. On your screen, look at the red box number 2. This is the correspondence information regarding the article, and if you wanted to address the head researcher, you would address Chris L. Kleinke in the Psychology Department, CAS 214, University of Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska. And this article was written in 1990. If it were written today, in that contact information also would be the email address, I'm sure. Finally, I want you to take a look at the last page of the article, the very bottom right-hand corner. And that information on that is contained in the red box number 3. So this article was received for publication on April 11th, 1989. and it would have been sent to several experts in the field to be read blind, and the experts would have to read the research and make recommendations to either publish with revisions, or to reject the article. And by the way, an article that is read blind, when I submitted an article to the Journal of Special Ed Technology, I had to submit 4 copies. And the acting editor took those 4 copies and sent it out to 4 experts in the field of special ed technology to read and to suggest publication or publication with revisions or to reject. But the article, when it was sent to the experts, was sent blind. In other words, my name did not appear anywhere on the articles. The university affiliation where I was did not appear. So there was no way for the experts to identify who had written the article and what institution the article came from. You get a much better and non-biased evaluation of an article when it's read blind. So in selecting articles for your research, always trying to select articles that are read blind. Okay, so the initial editorial decision was made in September. So the article was received in April of 1989, and the initial editorial decision was made in September. So it was sent out, and it took from April to September for the experts to make their decision and get back. And then obviously there were some revisions needed, because it says revisions received November 12th in 1989, and then revisions again on November 27th in 1989. And final acceptance of the article was on January 2nd, 1990, 9 months after the article was submitted. But the actual publication date was not until the summer of 1990, so that's over a year after being submitted for publication. In terms of journal articles, that's a fairly quick turnaround. So there was a rush to get this article published. Okay, so finally now, let's go back to page 1 and look at the title of the article. And again, that's the red box, number 4 at the bottom of your screen. Prompting bar patrons with signs to take free condoms. Okay, so we looked at the journal that the article was published in. We looked at the corresponding information if we wanted to contact the lead researcher. We looked at the initial editorial decision-making process and how that went, and the timeline, and then finally the title. Okay, now we're going to revisit the title and start to take a deeper look at your article. Okay, so some characteristics of a title. It should give a good indication of what the research is about. And in this case, I think it does. From just the title, it appears that there will be signs put up in bars encouraging patrons to take free condoms. And it should give an indication of the relevant variables, the dependent and independent variables. And in case you're not familiar with those terms, which you will become very familiar with in this course, the title does identify the relevant variables. The dependent variable is the number of free condoms that would be taken, and the independent variable is whether signs were present or not present in bars. Okay, let's take a look at the abstract. So some of the characteristics of a good abstract. It usually may give the purpose of the study, or why the study is being, why the study is being done. It should discuss somewhat the methodology in a brief way, how the study was done. The variables that were involved may be mentioned. The most salient findings, or the most important findings, usually are pointed out. And possibly a conclusion or some implications for the study. So, I want you now to put the video on pause, and I want you to read the abstract of the article you have in front of you. And I'd like you to take some notes while you're reading it. about the abstract's strengths and weaknesses as it compares to the criteria presented here. And you'll use these notes when it comes time to write your evaluation of the article. Okay, so put the video on pause, read and evaluate the abstract, take your notes, and then turn the video back on again. Okay, well, how did you evaluate the abstract? Did it give you a sense of the purpose of the study? Did it describe somewhat the methodology? Did it discuss variables? Did it talk about the findings or implications? What were your thoughts on that? Okay, now let's take a look at typical headings that appear in research articles. Now, this is in general. Not every one of these headings will necessarily appear in every research article or the research article that you have, but these are very typical. Usually there's an introduction section, and the introduction section is usually not labeled introduction. It's usually just the first several paragraphs of the research article. There may be a section on the review of a literature, and if there is not, or it may not be labeled, sometimes the review of the literature is not labeled, but it's included in the introductory section or in the development of the logic chain. Then there typically is a methods section or methodology. There's very typically a results section, a discussion section, and references. And there may be other headings or subheadings that may be included in other research articles depending on the purpose of those articles. But those are the general headings that you'll encounter. So we've glanced over the article, we've looked at the title and the abstract, we've looked at generally the headings that appear. Now we'll look at the characteristics of the typical sections of a research paper. We'll start with the introduction section. So let's take a look here. Typically, the introduction section is not labeled introduction, as I said, and it's usually the first few paragraphs of the article. As you can see on your screen, generally the introduction section will identify an overarching focus of a study, may stimulate interest in the topic and establish a rationale. It may place the research within a larger context. It may start out with a very big picture and narrow down to a specific area of inquiry or need, developing sort of a logic chain with citations as it goes along. In fact, we discussed that in the first video that you watched on the introduction. Generally, the introduction will let you know what is known about the topic and what is not known. So what is known would be sort of the background. What is not known is the need, what needs to be done, and then how your research will fit within the scope of the need. It may state a research question or hypothesis, if that's appropriate for the kind of study, or an area of inquiry. And it may also define some important terms. Now, in every introduction, not every one of these. Would it be appropriate that every one of these appears, or is it necessary that every one appears? But generally, this is what is involved in an introduction. Okay, so now it's your turn. I'm going to ask you to put the video on pause in a minute and to read the introduction paragraphs of the research article that you have in front of you. And I'd like you to take notes as you read, because again, these notes will come in handy when you complete the written assignment at the end of this video. So please put the video on pause and read and take some notes on the introduction, and then turn the video back on. Okay, how did you evaluate the introduction to this article? Did you see it, its strengths, its limitations? Was a clear logic chain with supporting citations established? When you complete the written assignment at the end of the video, specifically, how will you evaluate the introduction of this article? What is your evidence for your conclusions on that? let's take a look at a typical literature review section. Keep in mind that not all research articles contain a review of the literature section. Many times, the literature review is part of the introduction section and part of establishing the logic chain. But typically, a literature review is a summary of the research already done concerning the area of inquiry, what is already known. And it places the topic in a theoretical and also a historical context. In fact, the historical context of the article that we're reading was the beginning of the AIDS epidemic and national recognition of the problem. And the theoretical perspective was applied behavior analysis. Also, it may identify any trends or changes that have occurred over time. And it is not simply a summation of this study and then this study and then this study and then this study. It's more a synthesis and an analysis of what all of those studies mean. And it's usually a well-organized, cohesive, expository essay, actually. Well, our research article does not have a review of the literature section. But keep in mind that the relevant literature is reviewed usually then in the introduction. All right, now let's take a look at the methods section. Usually, a methods section will outline in specific detail the research methods that were used. And it's usually written like a cookbook recipe, so it can be replicated or duplicated. In other words, if someone wants to replicate your research, they'll be able to look at your methodology section and follow along and do exactly what you did. And usually it describes participants, if participants are part of the study, and appropriate demographic details. Usually it'll describe the research setting. It'll indicate the research design if that's appropriate, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. It would usually describe data collection procedures and any data collection instruments that were used. And it should be clearly written and very easy to follow, again, in case it needs to be replicated. Okay, well now it's your turn again. I'm going to ask you to, in a minute, to put the video on pause, to read the methods section of your article, and take notes. And again, use those notes when you get to your final assignment at the end of the video to evaluate the article. So please put the video on pause, and when you're done reading your methods section and taking notes, turn it back on again. Okay, so what was your evaluation of this methods section? Did it sort of stand up to the criteria of a good methods section as presented in the video? And specifically why and why not? And again, what was your evidence based on your conclusions? Good. Okay, well now we will go to the results section of a research article. This section of a research article is generally considered the most difficult section to read and comprehend, especially for those new to reading scientific articles. As you can see, in the research section, findings are usually presented, and they may be presented in terms of a narrative as well as with tables and graphs and diagrams and charts. If the study is a quantitative study, in other words, then the data may be reported using numbers and probably descriptive and or inferential statistics. If it's a qualitative study, then the data is reported usually in a narrative form. And the results should go back to the research question. The results should go back to the research question. Well, again, now it's your turn. In a minute, again, we'll ask you to put the video on pause and read the results section of the article and take your notes. Okay, so go ahead, put the video on pause, read your results section, take your notes, and then turn the video back on again. All right. What was your evaluation of the results section? Did it stand up to the criteria that we have on our screen in front of us, and specifically why or why not? And again, what is your evidence that your conclusions, what evidence did you use to make your conclusions? Good. Speaking of conclusions, we'll go to the conclusion section of a research article, which sometimes may be called, it may be called conclusions, it may be called discussion, may be called recommendations, sometimes limitations, although usually limitations would be included within conclusions or discussions. So in this section, no matter what it's called, there's a summary of the results. Some conclusions are drawn based on the data, and the conclusion would go back to the literature review. In other words, it would all be a cohesive piece. Practical and theoretical implications usually are discussed. Usually recommendations for further study are discussed. And conclusions should follow logically from the results. In other words, the authors should not go beyond their data to make any claims that are not supported by their data. And it's very typical for conclusions to have limitations as part of the conclusion section. Okay, so now again, your turn. I'm going to ask you to put the video on pause, read the discussion section of the research article, take some notes, and then turn the video back on and we'll talk about that. So go ahead, put the video on pause. All right, now what was your evaluation of the discussion section? Did it stand up to the criteria presented? Why not? And again, what evidence did you use to base your conclusions on? Next section is the limitations. Keep in mind that not all research articles contain a limitations section. Many times the limitations of a study are contained in the discussion or conclusion session, as we've mentioned earlier. So the limitation section may not be a separate section, as I said. It lists the major limitations to the study, and actually in terms of research terminology, it will discuss threats to internal validity and threats to external validity. Now, these may be terms you may not be familiar with. That's okay. You will become very familiar with them as we go through this class, so you don't have to worry about that for right now. Now, our research article that we have in front of us does not have a section called limitations, so you don't have to worry about reading it. But it's important because all research has limitations, and it's important that it's okay that research has limitations because all research does. But it's important that the researchers are aware of what those limitations are and should state them. Okay, so finally then we have the reference section. Take a look at the reference section of your research article. Obviously, it's a very good reference section because it appeared in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. References are extremely important. They're important for a couple of reasons. One, if someone wants to check out your sources, they have your sources right there. So it's easy for them then to look at your sources and see if the conclusions that you are drawn based on these references seem to be valid to them. The other thing is references are a very good way of finding new information about a topic you may be interested in. If you're doing a research project on, let's say, X, and you have one really good article about X, well, you look at the reference section in the back of that article, and there'll be other articles about X. So that's a good resource for you. And of course, references are put in applied behavior analysis format, or the American Psychological Association, sorry, the publication manual format. That's with the social sciences. Okay, well, I think we've made it through the entire article. That's pretty impressive. As I said earlier, reading research may be difficult at first, but as you become more proficient at it, you'll begin to realize that it's not that bad, and actually you may begin to realize you're very special. You're a very special breed. Not everyone has this skill. Now, a final word. At the very beginning of the last slide, I asked you to begin to examine the research article by looking at the name of the journal and when it was published. This article was received for consideration in April of 1989 and finally accepted for publication in January of 1990, but it actually wasn't published until the summer of 1990. So it was a year and a couple of months, pardon me, between the time it was received for consideration and its actual publication. Pardon me. Again, this may seem like trite, unimportant information, but consider this. If the article was sent to be reviewed for publication in April of 1989, and it took the researchers 4 or 5 months to prepare the article for publication, then we're talking about the researchers writing the article in 1988. And it most likely took at least a year or so to actually conduct the study. So now we're talking about 1987. So the article research was probably started around 1987. It didn't get published until 1990. It's up 2.5 years. Now, most of you are too young to know about the late 80s and the AIDS epidemic. It was just beginning to enter the national conversation. So this research was on the cutting edge, at the forefront of applied behavior analysis being used as a tool to conduct AIDS. So here's the point. All research happens within a social context, and that context, in one way or another, affects the research. So this research took place in a social context, which was the AIDS epidemic. One other point. This particular research has many flaws, or to use the research term, has many threats to its internal validity. It's not a very good piece of research. As an example, yes, more condoms were taken when signs were present in the bars, but we have no idea who took them and how they were used, so we don't know if they were used as they were intended to be. Now, the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis is one of the more prestigious research journals in the social sciences. So why would a prestigious journal publish such a flawed piece of research? Again, society was in the throes of the AIDS epidemic, and this was groundbreaking research that was attempting to combat the epidemic. Again, keep in mind, all research has social context and implications. So, be very good detectives. Read between the lines. Read and evaluate the research carefully and intelligently. All right, let's move on. Here's a model you may want to look at in terms of evaluating a piece of research or an article that you have in front of you. So up here we have a research methodology. And we can have good methodology, or we can have yucky methodology. I'm just using this binary, good and yucky. But there could be stuff in between too. So we have research methodology, good or yucky. Here we have research reporting. It could be good reporting, yucky reporting. So here we have, this box indicates a piece of research that has excellent methodology and very good reporting. This is a good piece of research. You want to use that. you want to use that in your thesis or field project. Now, you may have one that has yucky methodology and good reporting. In other words, it sounds good, but the methodology is yucky. You want to avoid that. That's not a good deal. If methodology is poor, then the findings cannot really be trusted. Now, here, you may have a piece of research methodology that is really good, but the reporting is not that good. Well, don't throw this away yet. If the methodology is sound, the conclusions may be good, even though they're reported. The reporting is not so good. So keep an eye on this one. And then, of course, you can have a yucky methodology and yucky reporting, and that's a bad deal. So you just put that in the trash. Well, that's sort of a very simple model to sort of assist you in considering the values of research articles that you're considering to use in your thesis or field project. Okay. So one sort of final point here. Reading through figures and tables and charts and graphs that are presented in research papers is an extremely important, and sometimes it's a difficult and often time-consuming task. However, consider the fact that the researcher or researchers considered the information contained in the visuals that they present as very important and to warrant sort of special attention. On our first skim through a research article, we may not fully understand all the complexity and nuances of the visuals that are presented, of the charts and tables and stuff like that. However, we would gain some idea of what the authors think is important, and we might uncover valuable information about what to pay attention to when we actually give the article a deep read. So, be prepared to spend some time digesting the information contained in the various charts, graphs, tables, figures, in the various visuals that are presented. And I'd like us to take a look at an example. Here is a visual. I'm going to give you a second just to take a look at this. Scan through it, and then I'll talk a little bit about it. Okay, this graphic is from the internet blog titled, sorry about that phone, this graphic is from the internet blog titled Guide to Reading Academic Papers by Kyle M. Shannon, and you can see the title and the author and the URL at the top of the screen in the yellow box. This figure is from a 2017 scientific paper. If you look at the red box at the very bottom of the screen, it'll give you the citation. And it addresses doctoral students' doctoral students' perceptions of the ease or difficulty of reading various sections of a research paper, such as the abstract, the introduction, the discussion, etc., when it is contrasted against their progress in their doctoral program. Are they a first-year doctoral student, second-year, third-year doctoral student? Have they gotten their PhD? Are they doing postdoctoral work? Or are they an academic now? Are they a professor? That's in box A. If you look, the red box, and if you look in the blue box, here, this graphic addresses the doctoral students' perceptions of the ranking in importance of various parts of a research article, when that is contrasted with their progress in their doctoral program. In other words, first year, second year, third year, are they a PhD, are they a postdoc, or are they an academic, are they a professor? And that is presented in box B. Now, I know I've not given you a lot of information about the figure, but that was on purpose. I want you to spend a few minutes carefully examining this figure and writing down some thoughts you might have on what it is intended to convey to the reader, to you. See if you can discern. See if you can be a good detective here. Try and figure this out. So put your detective hat on and try and solve this mystery. Put the video on pause and take 5 minutes or so, and then turn the video back on again. All right. You've had an opportunity to examine the figure and create some ideas as to what it is depicting. Let's take a look at it together. To begin with, let's take a look at the title of the figure. Here is the title. Many times people don't even see this, that there is a title to it. It says Figure 2, different sections of scientific papers are considered easy to read and important at different stages of academic careers. That's the title. Now, let's focus on the left side of the figure, part A, inside the red box. So we're going to focus on this side. We have a graph, and the horizontal axis right here, the x-axis, represents doctoral candidates' career stages, or how far along they are in their doctoral program. So this is second year, this is third year, this is PhD, postdoc, this is a professor, this is the academic. So that's their career stages. The vertical axis here is the percent of participants considering a section of the research article as easy to read. So down here, it's difficult to read. If your scores are up here, it's easy to read. Down the left side, here, you'll see the different parts of the article. So abstract, introduction, discussion, results, written in text only, the results when they're shown as figures or tables or charts, and the methods section. So these dots right here in this line are second-year doctoral students and how they see the difficulty or how easy things are to read. So you can see second-year doctoral students, the abstract is very easy to read because it's way up here and the introduction is easy to read. And actually, third-year doctoral students see it as easy to read. Actually, all doctoral students, no matter where, see the abstract and introduction as easy to read. Now, second-year students see the methods and the results section when presented with figures and tables as difficult to read. Difficult to read. And as they move along, it becomes easier and easier and easier to read. In the methods here, it goes down, difficult, but then it goes up to easy. So what's interesting is the trend of this data is it all seems to move eventually up to this area, which is pretty easy to read. So as people progress in their doctoral program, they get their PhD, they become postdocs, they become professors, almost all parts of the research article are perception is that it's easy to read. So that's the information sort of we get out of that side. Now, what did you think about this side? Well, here we have the same thing. Here we have the career stages, second year, third year, PhD, postdoc, professor. Same as we had. And we have here, on this part of the axis, the y-axis, the important ranking. So how important are these things? So, and we have here the parts of the article. So results, the results section of an article that has figures and tables and graphs, the results section that just has text, the methods section, the abstract, the introduction, and the discussion. So this is of little importance when it's down here. This is more important. So we see second-year doctoral students see this area as important. And as they move along, the results section becomes very important. So when people get to their postdoc and they become professors, the results section is important, very important. And also here. And the methods section becomes important. So these three tend to, as doctoral students move through their programs, tend to wind up becoming more important, and the abstract, the introduction, and discussion tend to be less important. So that's some of the conclusions that we can draw from that. So the point is, we would like you to spend some time sharpening your skill in reading the charts, graphs, and figures in research articles. It will greatly increase your understanding of the research literature, and you will become intelligent consumers of research. Good deal. Okay, so now you have two parts of this assignment. First, you should have been sent an article, an opinion paper, research opinion paper, Making Research Serve the Profession. And this paper should have already been mailed to you. If not, you need to let me know and I'll get it to you. And at the beginning of this article or opinion paper, there are several questions. I see 6, 7, or 8 questions that ask you to respond in writing to those questions. There is a section, a questionnaire at the end, I think. You can dismiss that. Don't pay any attention to that. But answer the questions that are asked. Second, you have just watched a video on things to consider when reading a research article, and you've taken notes and read a research article. We've done it together. So now I want you to write a summary using your notes and ideas, evaluating the article Prompting Bar Patrons with Signs to Take Free Condoms, and using the criteria presented in this video to evaluate it. Now, what I would like you to do is to put both of those pieces of writing into one document, one Word document. Please, no Google Docs or no PDF files, just a Word document. Put both of your responses in there. Title the document, your name, underscore, and then things to consider. So your file name will be your name with an underscore and then the words things to consider. And email that one document to me, happyj1939@yahoo.com. Well, thank you very much for your time and consideration, and I look forward to reading and reacting to your responses. Oh, if you're interested in some of the resources used to gather information on this video, here they are. Okay, thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.